Lot 180, and it is one of the most important historic tiaras to come to the market recently. It's from the second half of the 19th century, and what I'll do is I'll give a bit of information about its history, and then we can look a little bit more closely at the design and the stones and the pearls that are in it. So it comes with incredible provenance, and by provenance we mean we know who its past owners were and what the history of the item was. So it was likely given as a wedding gift to Maria Vittoria del Pozzo in 1867. She married when she was 19. She married Prince Amidio of Savoy. She was from an Italian aristocratic family, and it's believed that the Italian king gave her this tiara on the date of her wedding. Sadly, it wasn't a very long marriage. So in 1870, Amidio actually came to the throne in Spain. He was nominated by the Cortes, but he only lasted for about 3 years. He then abdicated and the couple returned to Italy. And there, unfortunately, Maria Vittoria died at the age of 29. But since then, the tiara has remained with the family. It comes from the House of Savoy, and it's been with them now, therefore, for over 150 years. And we don't know exactly what happened to it after Maria's death, but she had 3 sons, so it would have gone to one of them. And what we do know later on is that one of their cousins, King Umberto II of Italy, bought the tiara because he wanted to prevent the historic piece from leaving the family's collection. So the tiara itself is believed to be made by Musy, who was the court jeweler of Turin and one of the oldest goldsmiths in Europe. And you can see here that the tiara is set throughout with diamonds. They're cushion-shaped, circular cuts, and single cuts. There's about 150 to 170 carats of diamonds in there in total. And then the House of Savoy was very famous for their wonderful collection of natural pearls and in their jewels as well. And this is just a classic example. So there are 11 drop-shaped Baroque pearls, and Baroque we mean that they're slightly uneven in outline, but overall drop-shaped. Beautifully well matched. The largest one measures about 20 millimeters in length. And in gemology, we use these very precise millimeter measurements. So you will see this in the auction cataloguing and on laboratory reports as well. And in keeping with the fashion of the day, it was also for versatile jewelry. There's also a few ways that you can wear this tiara. So the top section with the pearls and the diamonds detaches and forms a rather wonderful necklace. And then the lower diamond section, this detaches from the tiara base, and you can see there are 2 hooks at the back where the ribbon would have been connected. And there are 2 options. You can either wear it as a diamond choker, or you can wear it as a diamond bandeau in your hair. So wonderful jewel, but it's also got the kind of provenance and the kind of history that can significantly impact the value of pieces when they are sold at auction. And we're just going to go into a few past examples of where this was very clearly demonstrated. So if we go to the next slide, please, we will see in November 2018, Sotheby sold a collection of jewels from the Bourbon-Parma family, who are one of the most important European royal dynasties. They were descended from Louis XVI of France and spanned several hundreds of years. And 10 of these jewels from the collection belong to Louis XVI's wife, Marie Antoinette, who we probably all know of. She was famously the doomed last queen of France. And these jewels were really interesting because not only were they owned by Marie Antoinette, but they actually played a role in her final days, because one of her lady-in-waiting wrote an account that in March 1791, King Louis, Marie Antoinette and their children began to prepare for their escape from France. And according to the lady-in-waiting's accounts, Marie Antoinette spent the entire evening in the palace, wrapping up her pearls, her diamonds, and her rubies, and placing them into a wooden chest. And from there, this chest of jewels was sent to Brussels and then on to Vienna, where they were placed in the safekeeping of her nephew, the Emperor of Austria. And then in the following year, they were imprisoned in France. And then, as we know, in 1793, Marie Antoinette and Louis were executed by the guillotine. And their 10-year-old son, also called Louis, sadly died in captivity. So the king and queen's only surviving child was Marie Therese of France, also known as Madame Royale. So she was released in 1795 after 3 years of solitary confinement. And after learning of the deaths of her mother and her brother, she went to Austria, where she was given back her mother's jewels by the emperor when she arrived by her cousin. And she actually didn't have any children herself. She had a niece and an adopted daughter, Marie Louise of France, and she bequeathed some of Marie Antoinette's jewelry and her own jewels to her, and from there they passed down into subsequent members of the family. And so they came with a very, very fascinating provenance, and this was demonstrated in the sale results of the day. So one example is this beautiful natural pearl and diamond necklace, and actually originally came from a 3-row pearl necklace belonging to Marie Antoinette. And it had an estimate of $40,000 to $70,000 and ended up selling for a total of $447,000 on the day. And Eva will go into some more details shortly about natural pearls, but just as a brief overview to go into the necklace design a bit further. So, you know, each natural pearl, if you like, is a bit of a freak of nature. It forms in a kind of defense in a mollusk or an oyster. But this doesn't happen in all of them, and they're very, very difficult to find. So in the Gulf, for example, which was very famous, one of the world's main sources of natural pearls, these divers could look all day, diving all day, going to extreme depths, free diving, and not find any pearls. They could bring up all these oysters, open them, nothing there. Sometimes the pearls were found, but they were quite small and misshapen. So to find just one beautiful round natural pearl, such as this, such as those in the necklace, is a lucky find anyway, let alone 39 that go into this necklace here, all very well matched in size. All of them were between 7 and 9 millimeters in diameter, and beautifully matched as well in terms of the color and the quality, which we call the luster. If we go to the next slide, we can see the most remarkable example, though, from that Bourbon-Palmer auction. And this was Marie Antoinette's natural pearl and diamond pendant. So this actually was suspended from the 3-row natural pearl necklace that the previous necklace became part of. And this was a phenomenal pearl in its own right. It measured 25 millimeters in length. It was beautiful drop shape, beautiful white body color. So intrinsically, it has an awful lot of value anyway. So we added a bit more on for the Marie Antoinette factor, and we came to an estimate of 1 million to 2 million. And it exceeded all of our expectations by selling for over $36 million on the day of the auction, which to date is the world record for natural pearls sold at auction. And now if we go over to Ava, she's going to go into a bit more of the technical characteristics of these natural pearls.
Thank you, Sophie. Well, before I start talking about the formation of natural pearls, I would like everybody to notice the size of this particular pearl, because correct me if I'm wrong, Sophie, but I think it's like 25 millimeters tall. Mm-hmm. So it's quite a very, very large pearl. We will see together in the following images that natural pearls are, as Sophie said previously, are truly a freak of nature. It's something, it's a matter of chance, let's say, to have the formation of a natural pearl. And as such, it is something that happens very, very rarely. When it does happen, usually the products are very small, very misshapen, very regular in the shape. So all the pearls that we have seen in the previous jewelry are actually true miracles of nature. So let's take a look at how natural pearls form. The first distinction to make is between the natural pearls and the cultured pearls. Most of the pearls that you will see today in the market are actually cultured pearls, which means that they are truly pearls, but their formation was triggered by human intervention. So basically, we induced the formation to the oyster. We, let's say, created the conditions for the oysters to give us pearls. And the other major division, which we'll also see in the next images, is that the natural pearls are truly 100% nacre, so the substance that we actually see and touch as a pearl, while the cultured pearls typically internally have a very large bead, and the nacre, so the substance that the actual oyster is secreting on top of this bead, ranges in thickness between, let's say, 0.5 millimeter to maximum 4 or 5 millimeters in the best occasions. So the majority of the cultured pearls is basically composed of the bead that we put inside the body of the living oyster, and the rest of it, very few millimeters on the surface, are actually the product of the oyster. While on the other hand, as we have seen in the previous images, and as you see in this schematic illustration here, when we talk about natural pearls, we talk about pearls that have been formed without any human intervention, without any human assistance, if you wish. Now, everybody has heard about the theory of the sand grain, and everybody probably has heard back in time, or how our grandfathers used to say, that when the oyster opens, some grains of sand enter inside and they irritate the oyster, and the oyster creates a pearl. Well, it's not so simple as that in reality. The most important thing to notice is in the physiology of these oysters that are able to produce pearls. In reality, among the hundreds of different types of or species of oysters that we find in our oceans and in our rivers and lakes, only a small percentage are capable of producing natural pearls. And to make it simple, let's say, for you to recognize those that could be capable of producing pearls, you can actually take a look at the internal part of their hard shell. Most of those animals that can give us pearls are what we call bivalves, which means that they have two-part shells. In this image down here, you see one of those two shells opened. You see the soft organs internally, and you see this man harvesting, as we say, a finished whole pearl from the gonad of the oyster. So this is the situation that's happening when we're harvesting the cultured pearls, because this is the organ that we use for inducing the irritation in the animal. Now, as you can see, and as you have all probably seen in shells, there is this layer, this iridescent layer that lines the internal part of this hard shell, which we call the mother of pearl. And the substance that is composing this mother of pearl is exactly the same substance that we find on the surface of the pearls. Either these are natural pearls or they are cultured pearls. When this substance, which is basically composed of calcium carbonate together with some organic substances, is found on the shell, we call it mother of pearl. When it is found on the pearl, we call it the nacre. This is the word that I'm using here. Which part of the oyster is responsible, let's say, for creating, for producing, for secreting this substance that becomes eventually and in time a natural pearl? The most important organ inside the oyster, inside the mollusk, is this soft organ, this soft tissue that lines the internal part of the shells, which is what we call the mantle of the animal. So it's this soft skin-like tissue you see when you open an oyster. Within that, you find all the other soft organs of the animal. Why is this mantle so important, and why is it so let's say, so essential for the formation of the natural pearls? This mantle, on the outer part of it, so where it comes into contact with the hard shell, it contains some particular types of cells, which we call the epithelial cells, or the epithelium of the oyster. These cells are the only types of cells inside the body of an oyster that can produce the nacre, can produce the calcium carbonate in the form of aragonite together with organic substances that can actually grow into becoming mother of pearl or grow into becoming a natural pearl. So why did I say before that the grain of sand theory is not very exact? It is true that the bivalve oysters open up to feed mostly. So when they open up while they're living in the ocean or in the rivers, it is very easy that sand will enter inside their bodies. So in most cases, the sand that enters inside their bodies doesn't really create this much of an irritation for them to have the need, let's say, to cover this irritation with something. What we need in reality so that the oyster will actually start producing nacre, is to find these epithelial cells somehow inside the body of the oysters. Only when we have such an irritation that is combined by a foreign irritant, like a grain of sand, if you wish, or like a parasite, or like a piece of shell that is dislodged, that's found inside the body because of injury happening naturally inside the ocean, and that comes together with the epithelial cells, and they find themselves together inside the body of the oyster, only then can we have the creation of a natural pearl. So what happens is that we have some minute extraneous matter, let's say a small piece of the shell, that takes with it some of the epithelium of the oyster, and it finds itself inside the body of the oyster. Now, two things might happen when this is occurring in nature. One thing is that the oyster will not survive the injury and we will possibly die. Or the other thing is that the oyster will have to react to this irritation, and as a means of defense, it will start covering this irritation with a particular substance. The first thing that grows is what we call the pearl sac. So these epithelial cells that have been dislodged, have been transferred inside the body of the oyster, grow by cell division, let's say, grow and surround this irritation, this parasite or this piece of shell, whatever the irritation might be. Because we have the epithelial cells, after they're finished covering the irritation with the soft tissue, then these same cells start secreting calcium carbonate in the form of aragonite together with an organic substance which we call conchylin, and layer after layer, this nacre, this substance, is covering the irritation. So the secretion of calcium carbonate in the form of nacre continues throughout the active life of the oyster, and this leads eventually to the formation of a natural pearl. In most cases, when this irritation arrives to a size that can be manageable by the oyster to remove it from its body, in most cases, it will simply open up and remove this irritation from its body. In other occasions, depending on the location where this irritation is found inside the oyster, it might continue secreting nacre, layers after layers of nacre on top of the irritation, until hopefully we find the oyster and will harvest the natural pearl. So this is a process that is actually a very rare thing to happen, and when it does, in most cases, we said before, it will give us something very regular that will follow the shape of this microscopic irritation, and we will have the formation of something very, very tiny, like a very, very small, like a few millimeters, if you wish, of a natural pearl. So imagine that the pearls we saw in the previous images are actually something extremely difficult to happen. In most cases, what we find is irregular and very, very tiny. Now, why are natural pearls so rare, or what contributes to this rarity? As we said before, the process itself is in fact a rare process, is in fact a miracle. It is a miracle that the oysters can continue producing submicroscopic layers of this nacre, one on top of the other, to grow and become a large natural pearl. But there are many other factors that have actually contributed to the decline of natural pearls, of the industry of natural pearls after 1900s. And these factors are the reasons why natural pearls are so rare today and so incredibly valuable, because they're treasures, because they're miracles. So this combination of factors includes, first of all, the introduction of plastic buttons. Think that before the 1920s, people have been harvesting oysters because we needed the mollusk shells as a raw material to create mother of pearl buttons for our clothing. Occasionally, people also found natural pearls inside the oysters that they harvested, but the pearls were actually secondary byproducts. So the introduction of plastic buttons in 1920 actually caused many companies to stop fishing for natural natural oysters, so for living oysters. Another very, very important factor that led to the decline of natural pearl industry is the development of the pearl culturing techniques. This happens in the late 1800s, 1890s, more or less, we started creating blister pearls in Japan and in Australia. And then in 1908, 1907, some companies in Japan have started producing cultured whole pearls. So because we have developed the techniques to produce cultured pearls, and we find that that could be actually kind of easier instead of having, as Sophie was saying before, to dive 20 hours per day and look for a miracle inside an oyster. This also led to the decline of the natural pearl industry. The other important factor that had the same result was the discovery of oil in the Persian Gulf in 1908. So as Sophie was saying, the Persian Gulf has historically been one of the most important sources of natural pearls. We have been diving for natural pearls for many, many years, for thousands of years in the Persian Gulf. And still today, there is some occasional production of pearls. We have pearl farms developed now that give us cultured pearls in the same area, but occasionally we still find a few natural pearls that could be of gem quality. So it is a very, very important region for the natural pearl industry. However, we discovered oil in 1908 in that region, and the oil business replaced the natural pearl production as the region's primary international industry. So many people actually invested in the oil industry. And the other issue that was caused by the oil industry is that the industrial boom that followed eventually polluted the oyster beds. The oysters, to survive and thrive in an environment, they need very clean waters and very stable conditions. So even minor changes in their habitat will actually cause them to die out. So many, many different factors, as you understand, work together. And since the beginning of the 1900s, we had less and less and less natural pearls. So the ones that we find and that are of this size and quality, like the ones we will see together today, are truly miracles, truly a natural treasure, let's say. Now, the natural pearls, as I was saying before, start by the small submicroscopic irritation that the oyster covers with layers of nacre. So this results in an onion-like structure that you can actually see in this X-ray image here. You see these concentric little lines that actually show us that are reading the reaction of this material in the X-ray. Show us the typical growth of natural pearl. So one of the most important tools gemologists are using to identify the natural pearls from the cultured pearls, so divide to materials that have an immense difference in their value, is the X-radiography or the microradiography. It is a non-destructive test that allows us to look inside the pearl and understand more information about its structure. Remember that pearls are opaque materials, so we can't really use our microscope to identify their internal world like we do with other gemstones. So we have to base our observations on their surface, or if they are drilled, like the ones you see in these images, what we can see through the drill hole. Other than that, we will need some kind of equipment that allows us to see the growth of the material. So in these pictures here, you see a report that states that these pearls on these jewels on this jewel are natural, and in the pictures on the left, you see the typical characteristic layered growth of the natural pearls. So the other important thing to understand about this is that although this X-radiography or the microradiography allows us to see inside the pearls, we can actually have to face difficult challenges because many of those pearls are very old. They have been worn for many years, so their characteristics are somehow, let's say, not so clear anymore for us to observe, and many of them are also drilled. And by the drilling, we are actually removing a very important central portion from the pearl. So what you see in this picture on the bottom here is actually the metal that passes through the natural pearl's center, and it is the metal that the jeweler has used to string these pearls in a brooch or in another piece in any way. So it might seem like a simple process, but it is not, let's say, not so easy. It requires a knowledgeable person to read the reaction that you see in the extradiography. So if you compare this to this, you understand the difference between the cultured pearls and the natural pearls. What you see here, determined by this circle, is actually the size of the bead that we humans put inside the body of the oyster. And this very, very thin layer is the layer of nacre, excuse me, that the oyster actually secreted on top of this bead. So you see that in a cultured pearl, the majority of the material you see, especially we're talking about a bead nucleated cultured pearl, because we have other methods as well. The majority of the bead you see as a pearl is actually composed by the core, by the nucleus, as we call it, that we insert inside the oyster. So this also shows you how easy it is, or if I want to call it easy, let's say, for us to create larger cultured pearls, and how difficult the same size is to be obtained by a natural pearl, by an oyster that hasn't been irritated by humans, let's say. The other challenge that we face in the laboratories today concerning pearls is the many, many imitations and many, many treatments that pearls are subjected to. Everybody likes pearls. They are one of the most popular gemstones out there. Being such a popular gem and such a famous gem and such a loved and cherished gem in history of humans, they are one of the most ancient gemstones people have ever used, actually. People have also started imitating them many, many years ago. I think that there were the ancient Romans, the first ones, or there's the Egyptians, the first ones that have created imitation of pearls. So imitating a material is not a very new thing. The most common imitations that we find even today in the market are simply glass beads that have been covered by an iridescent varnish that imitates the appearance of the pearls. Sophie will follow with showing you an imitation, like a very, very important imitation pearl necklace. So this will show you glass beads and that are covered with a product which we call a sandstone. It is a clear varnish mixed together with ground fish scales, iridescent fish scales that give the glass bead this kind of pearly appearance that imitates the natural pearls. So apart from the imitations and apart from the most common imitation, which is this glass bead that I just mentioned, we have a lot of treatments that we need to be aware about, starting with irradiation or the commonly encountered lately, the Mysore treatment, which is a multi-part chemical treatment, or dyeing, or a treatment with silver nitrates, or coating, or oiling. So pearls are actually, even when they are not imitation, but they are truly cultured pearls, they also get treated to enhance their appearance. So all those treatments will actually might enhance their appearance, but in most occasions will also diminish the value of the pearls. In most cases, we will not see a lot of treatments in natural pearls, but you never know. People wanted to protect their natural pearls for many years, so they have been coating them with substances, and that too might also alter the aspect of the pearls, and in time might also alter their value as well. So it is essential that the pearl jewelry we are working with comes together with a certificate, not only whether it is a certificate of origin, so it is a natural or a cultured pearl, also a certificate or a report, let's say, that states the presence or absence of treatments from the pearls. So Sophie, the floor is back to you.
Thank you, Eva. Yes, so just a bit of a fun point. So carrying on from what Eva was saying about these imitation pearls. So this point of provenance that we were talking about before, when we know that such jewels were worn and owned by a famous person, this can still, make these pieces fetch significant sums at auction, even if they're intrinsically not worth so much themselves. So in 1996, Sotheby's New York sold the estate of Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis. And one of the pieces was this imitation pearl and crystal necklace. So going back to Eva's point, these weren't even natural pearls. They were, probably bits of glass or plastic, like Eva was saying, and then coated with this iridescent coating to look like the nacre or the mother of pearl. So we thought, when we're valuing this piece, it might have retailed for about $60, but it was owned by Jackie O. She's photographed wearing it in this very sweet photo with her son. So we thought, let's be a bit punchy with the estimate, and we put $500 to $700 on it. And you may be wondering or maybe guessing what it sold for on the day, but if we can go to the next slide, you'll see it sold for a rather considerable sum of $211,500, which was very, very interesting. And it was actually bought by a retailer called Franklin Mint, who then used this. They kind of had the rights to the necklace then, and they created many models. They called it the Jackie necklace, and it was one of their most popular pieces to be sold. So it was a good buy for them, even though it was quite expensive from the auction. And then going back to natural pearls, just before we move on to Kashmir Sapphires, we're just going to look at a couple more examples of natural pearls that are coming up at Sotheby's Geneva this week. So these are actually in part 2 of the auction, which is running online until Thursday the 13th, so to the end of this week. And they include lot 100, 660, which is this pair of natural pearl and diamond ear clips by Bulgari from about 1957. And again, we see the term Baroque, meaning slightly irregular in outline, but these lovely drop shapes with cream and grayish brown colors. Then we also have lot 679, which is a natural pearl and diamond ring. And these are set with 3 button-shaped pearls. So this is the term we use when the shape is characteristically having these rounded tops with a flattish bottom. And the estimate for these are 14,000 to 23,000 Swiss francs. Okay, so if we go to the next slide, we can begin with Kashmir Sapphires. So we're going to be talking about sapphires from the fabled mine of Kashmir. And this is because in tomorrow's sale in part 1 of Magnificent Jewels and Noble Jewels in Geneva, we are selling 2 of the largest Kashmiri sapphires ever to appear at auction. So these 2 sapphires come into a brooch that we'll see an image of slightly later on. And the cushion-shaped sapphire weighs just under 26 carats. And the oval-shaped sapphire weighs a whopping 55 carats, 55.19 carats. And this is the largest Kashmiri sapphire to be sold at auction to date. And each of them exhibits this lovely, deep, velvety blue that these sapphires are very famous for. It's not matched by sapphires from anywhere else in the world. So they're very beautiful in themselves, but then a lot of their allure as well comes from their rarity. And Ava again is going to be speaking about the mines, the Kashmiri mines. But basically, just as a brief overview, they were discovered somewhat by accident in about 1881 when a landslide happened in the Kudi Valley of the Himalayas. And the mine was only open for about 5 or 6 years. It was very, very difficult to mine from there, very inhospitable climate, inhospitable conditions. The mine was only open for 3 months of the year. So the mine was only open for about 5 or 6 years. And within that time, only a few months of the year could these sapphires be taken out. So anything over 10 carats really for Kashmiri sapphires from this time is quite amazing. So as well as these, I just wanted to touch on in the next slide, which was the Richelieu sapphires. So these were also sold by Sotheby's in Geneva in 2013, and these were both over 20 carats. So one just over 20 carats and one just over 26.5 carats. And they were beautifully matched enough to become a pair of earrings. And they were owned by Odile de Richelieu. They were also given as a wedding gift when she married in 1905. And since then, they've been remounted twice as a pair of earrings. And we know that since they sold at Sotheby's in 2013, they've been remounted again since by the latest buyer. But you can really see here and get an idea of this stunning color. So Kashmiri sapphires are often held up as the ultimate standard of how you want a sapphire to look. It's, you know, the color to these stones is very unique, and it's a softness that can only be described as velvety, and is often compared, the blue is compared to that of a cornflower. But with this limited production, like I say, Kashmiri sapphires therefore make up a tiny part of the world's total sapphire supply, and therefore auction is one of the very few means that you can acquire such lovely stones. And Ava, if you could just give a bit more information about the history of the Kashmir mine, and we can talk a bit more about their scarcity.
Sure. So as you see in this map here that we have on your screens, I have all the different locations in the world where we do actually today mine for blue sapphires. So you see that the sapphire sources are located around the globe. They go from the United States down to China, and also have a big production of blue sapphires in Australia. So why do these Kashmir sapphires have such an importance? Why are they so valuable? Well, as Sophie said before, the term Kashmir usually refers to what the trade considers to be the finest blue sapphires. The finest fine Kashmir sapphires are actually setting the standard of beauty and of quality and of intensity of color, against which we will compare all the other sapphires from all the other sources in the world. So the materials that we have found in the Kashmir mines have never been discovered anywhere else in the world. They are completely, extremely unique. And although we have a large production of sapphires around the globe, nothing matches the beauty of the Kashmiri stones. It is true that they're often described as cornflower blue, as Sophie said before, and the reason why we use this term is, well, you can see it in this image here. This is the cornflower, so this is the intense blue that is found in the Kashmiri sapphires. You see an example here. And locally, I think it's within India or locally around the Kashmiri mines, they're also referred to as the peacock's neck blue, this very, very intense blue color. Well, despite this universal esteem, let's say, or love for the Kashmir sapphires, the actual quality of the sapphires from that source is actually showing us a great variety. So it's not simply a Kashmir stone that we value, it is the high quality Kashmir stones. As Sophie was saying before, the glory days, let's say, of the Kashmir sapphire mining were between, like very, very few years, between 1881 and 1887, more or less. After that, there was not true production. So what we use today when we trade in very important Kashmir sapphires is the products of that very limited production that happened back in that day, so more than 100 years ago, 1881 down to 1887, 1888. After this date, the production started declining. So the ruler of Kashmir had to call for a geologist to do some extra research and find out how we can actually have more of these products. Even when the geologists arrived, they found out that the actual original source, which we call old mine today, has been exhausted, so there are no sapphires anymore. So they started focusing on the valley below, where they developed what we call the new mines. The problem is, or if you want. The issue is, the characteristic is that the sapphires from these new mines have nothing to compare with the sapphires from the old mines. They might be coming from the same location, and they might have resulted from the same geologic forces. It is a very important metamorphism that happens in the Himalayas up there. It's like two different types of rocks that interact with each other, and we have very high temperature and very high pressure that reaches quite, let's say, that covers a big location, a big area, and around the fringes of this metamorphic event, we have the formation of sapphires. So it is the same source, it is the same location, it probably is the same geologic event that causes the sapphires in the new mines as well, but the quality is very different. So the highest quality Kashmir sapphires are the ones that came from the old mines, from the original mines that, as Sophie was saying, were discovered by accident. It was a landslide that revealed to us. We went there, very difficult location to reach, as you see in this image here. Very dangerous, very challenging journey. The people had to climb with ropes, cross rope bridges, use ponies, use their feet, climb over canyons, and then they would arrive to this very, very remote location where they could dig for a limited time because of the snow that covered the location. So although it was so difficult, people insisted on reaching the mines because the product, as you see in this othering that was sold by Sotheby a few some time ago, I don't remember, Sophie, excuse me. The product was this, so this very, very high quality velvety appearance. So it's not only the color blue that's very intense, but it's also the actual nature of this material that makes it so different from other sapphires from other locations in the world.
Thank you, Ava. So we're just going to look, before we go back to the two largest sapphires, we're going to look at a few other examples of Kashmiri sapphires in the auction tomorrow. There's a nice variety here that you can see. So lot 117 is a nice cushion shape, 5.43 carats, a bit paler in its overall colour compared to some others, as you can see here. And it's quite interesting as well to look at the estimates and how, you know, the size of the sapphire, the colour of the sapphire can affect the value that we've given it. Lot 123. So this is a nice 4.13 carat, also cushion-shaped cashmere, and it's set alongside a cushion-shaped ruby weighing just over 2 carats, which is Burmese and has the pigeon blood colour grading, which we can go into more detail with maybe in our second seminar, Ava. We can do rubies next. And the pendant also set with 2 diamonds as well, so 36 points and half a carat, and they're both a D colour, so top colour, and internally flawless clarity. Also has an estimate of 100 to 150,000 Swiss francs. In the next slide, we can see a beautiful, beautiful step gut here, large cashmere, 11.33 carats, and this has an estimate of $500 to $800,000. And then this beautiful 1915, approximately, the ring, lovely ring design. This is another cushion shaped, weighing 5.87 carats. And a beautiful colour, this one as well, as you can see. And this has an estimate of $113 to $200,000. But we're just going to, I just wanted to end again actually on the pair which are coming up for auction tomorrow. And here we can see that they're set in this beautiful diamond brooch by Cartier, which was believed to have been done in about the 1930s. But just wanted to give a little bit of the ownership history of the two sapphires, because they were given to a lady called Maureen Constant Guinness, the Marchioness of Dufferin and Ava, by her grandmother-in-law, Harriet Hamilton Temple Blackwood. Now, Harriet was born in 1843, and at the age of 19, she married Frederick Hamilton Blackwood, who was 19 years older than her and extremely intelligent. He was educated at Eton and Oxford, and he went on to have a very impressive diplomatic career. And the couple had 7 children between 1863 and 1875. But it's from about 1872 that we have a lot of detail about the couple's lives, because Harriet Hamilton Temple Blackwood was a very dedicated diarist. She would write in her journal every day. And these were actually published later on, and covered the couple's time in Canada, India, Russia, and Turkey. But it was during their time in India as a couple that has the strong link to these sapphires. So they were made Viceroy and Vicereine of India between 1884 and 1888. So really correlating at the exact same time as the old mine in Kashmir was open, and these 2 sapphires came from there. Because Lady Dufferin was very famous for, or became very well known for, her charitable work in India and what is now modern day Pakistan. So when the couple were leaving India in 1888, there was a leather-bound inventory of Lady Dufferin's belongings, and it included her jewels and her ornaments. And these 2 sapphires, so after, on the first page, there's a printed list, and you can see in this picture just about, there's a handwritten edition saying 2 large sapphires set with diamonds as a pendant given to me by the people of Punjab and sent after my return. So in the time that Lady Dufferin was in India, 2 of the largest finds from the Kashmir mines were given to her. And then obviously we can see now it's still not mounted in the pendant that it was originally referred to, because the handwritten entry is then marked, it's crossed out in blue ink, and next to it is written "Latter left to Maureen, Lady Dufferin," which points to the next chapter in their history. And that's because in 1930, Harriet's grandson Basilton Hamilton Temple Blackwood married Maureen Constant Guinness. So she was from the Guinness brewing fortune from the family. And her 3 sisters were very famous, Maureen and her 3 sisters. They were very fashionable, very stylish, threw some great parties. And when he married her, she was given these 2 sapphires, and she remounted them in this brooch by Cartier. And the jewel has stayed with the family ever since. It's the first time that it will appear on the market in tomorrow's auction in Geneva. So it'll be very interesting to see what it sells for. Its estimate, as you can see, is $1,880,000 to $2.8 million.
So you just heard Sophie talking about the, because I have seen some of your questions about the prices, how much are these fantastic sapphires? Well, you've got an idea with Sophie's talk now about how valuable these materials are when they are in this high quality like the ones you saw before. It's not only the high quality, it's not only the high color, but also the very, very large size of that particular Kashmir sapphire. It's truly an amazing gem. I mean, it's really interesting to follow the auction tomorrow to find out how it will end up. So you understand also that it is very, very important for a gemological laboratory to be able to certify the origin of a sapphire. So the quality of the sapphire will give it its high value, but also there are some locations tied to particular types of gemstones that will also increase the value of the gem. And one such is the Kashmir origin for sapphires. We might have a similar, not the same, but similar aspect in color in sapphires from other locations. But if we're talking about a Kashmir sapphire with that particular color, then we're talking about something extremely, extremely valuable. So it is very, very important that those sapphires come together with a report that states their origin as well as their quality, and of course the absence of any treatments to enhance their appearance. So the gem trade relies on a few gemological laboratories to provide the services for origin determination. GIG is proudly one of them. And what we do basically when we start analyzing the origin of a sapphire is that Well, first of all, you have to know it's a very, very challenging thing to do, because especially for the blue sapphires, because the nature of the material doesn't really allow many contaminants, if you wish, to enter in the structure. So those contaminants would be the ones that would help us identify the origin of other gemstones. Well, sapphires are really, let's say, close to themselves. They don't want foreigners in their structures. So it makes it really challenging for us to discover their location, their origin. So the first thing to do is certainly do a careful examination of inclusions in the microscope. And it's not a very simple thing to do. It requires years of experience, because we need to discover very, very particular formations that we find inside some sapphires and inside some sapphires from Kashmir. The first thing that's characteristic of those sapphires is, of course, what we said before, the velvety appearance. But the velvety appearance, or sleepy appearance, as some people like to call it, is due to the presence of submicroscopic, really, really tiny inclusions that are found inside the sapphires. And being so tiny and being slightly reflective, they tend to scatter the light inside the stone. So from one side, they make the stone look milky or cloudy, if you wish, so not very crisp and transparent. But on the other side, by diffusing the light, they actually intensify the blue color of the stone. So this is what you see in this picture taken under magnification. Here you can see this kind of dust, as we call it, particles that are characteristic of some Kashmir sapphires that are giving this aspect. Apart from the careful examination in the microscope, we also need to use trace element chemistry to find out those contaminants I was talking about before that tie particular types of stones to the rocks into which they formed. And of course, we also need spectroscopic data like the one you see in this image here. So we have two different types of groups of sapphires based on the geological conditions into which they're formed, and the geological conditions will actually have a direct result in the aspect of the gem itself. We have the metamorphic type of sapphires, like the ones we saw before from the Kashmir, and we also have the other types that are related with basalt that actually have different aspect, different colors, and different trace element chemistry internally. The issue, let's say the most modern issue the gemological laboratories have to face is the so-called Kashmir-like sapphires, because for many years this particular cloudy or velvety aspect was the number one characteristic of these sapphires from Kashmir, or also the particular type of inclusions they might contain, or the particular intensity of their blue color that we analyze in the laboratory. But lately we have had the discovery of a new source of sapphires from Madagascar that has a very similar formation environment like the one that occurs in Kashmir, and that also gives us blue sapphires, among other colors of corundums. So those sapphires can be extremely beautiful, and they can be very convincing as a substitute, let's say, of the true Kashmiri sapphires. So these are the ones that are sold when they come with a certificate, when they come with a report. They're sold as Kashmir-like sapphires. So it takes a very, very high degree of expertise, especially today with the Kashmir-like sapphires, to identify, positively identify the Kashmiri origin in the sapphires. You will see a lot of those sapphires in the market today, and although they might look similar, they're not identical to the trained eye. They look identical to the untrained eye. To the Kashmiri ones, they will always have a lower value because of the tradition that comes together with the true Kashmiri materials, and also the rarity that comes together with the true Kashmiri material. So a report is actually, let's say, the safest way to make sure whether your sapphire is truly Kashmiri, or one from Madagascar, or from Thailand, or from Montana, or from whatever it might come. So keep in mind that we do have some other locations, especially Madagascar, the south of Madagascar, that can give us similarly looking sapphires, similar, again, I repeat, to the untrained eye. hopefully we have gemological laboratories that can still make the difference. So to close the presentation, remember that in modern gemology we have the classic gemology analysis with the microscope and all the tools we use in classic gemology, but we also today need to back up our standard gemology test with high technology, with the application of high technology, especially when we want to talk about the nature of materials like the natural pearls versus the cultured pearls, or the origin of the materials like Kashmiri versus Kashmir-like sapphires, or of course to diagnose the treatments of all types of gemstones. So with this, both me and Sophie, thank you very much. And we will be very happy to answer to your questions.
Thank you very much, Sophie. Okay, now we didn't finish yet. Okay, so
I see many questions arriving in the Q&A section.
Not only that, not only that. But let's
okay.
start from really the first one. And Vahid was asking, he's asking, the foreign attacker is mainly a parasite rather than sand. So it's, I think it's connected to the, I think it is linked to the pearls formation in mollusk.
Mm-hmm. Yes, as I was said before, the grain of sand will typically not really cause any major irritation to the oyster. They are used to living in the sand, so they're used to having sand lying around in their body. What is the problem is usually caused by an injury that breaks small particles of the shell, of the hard shell of the oyster. And these small particles, small pieces of the shell, dislodge also the epithelium, and all together they end up getting locked inside the soft tissues of the oyster. This is a kind of irritation that is typically leading to the formation of nacre and of course to the let's say growth of a natural pearl. It could be a parasite, it could be larvae. We have found larvae of other species, but usually true, it's not a grain of sand alone.
Okay, I'm trying to follow the chronological criteria, so don't feel upset if I'm not mentioning you and me immediately. From Al Yakdan, thank you. This is a comment. Thank you. Fantastic webinar. We need the Center of Excellence in GCC. Okay, we are working on it. Thank you very much, Al Yakdan. Samir, is it true that this is for you, Sophie? Is it true that the necklace was belonging to Queen Marie Antoinette? And if it is, what are the criteria to determine, I'm trying to fix the question later, what are the criteria to determine the historical profile of a piece?
Sorry, I didn't hear the whole question. Could you say it again, Javier?
It's about the necklace of Queen Marie Antoinette. Yes. And how we can determine it's real belonging to her.
Because it stayed with the same family ever since it came down from Marie Antoinette. So this hasn't been, you know, sent out of the Bourbon-Parma family in all of these centuries, and it's well documented, well recorded. So we have very reliable provenance and knowing that it came from her. But very good question, because it's a long time since she wore it.
Yeah, that was from Samir. And then again for you, Sophie, from Rim, why this estimate price is made of two prices. So I think why we have a range in the estimated price.
Very, very good question. So this, you know, the low estimate and the high estimate, it's the range, if you like, that we would expect an item to sell for in the auction. But also what the low estimate is, it often acts as a reserve. So if, for example, you're interested in selling any items through jewelry, you know, selling any items through auction, what we do is we give the low estimate, and that's also the reserve price. So if in the unlikely scenario, our bids don't reach that low price, then the item doesn't sell. So that's really the very important price to be aware of. That acts as the protection for you as the seller. But the high estimate, it doesn't need as much attention as the low estimate. It's just giving a nice range. So what we think approximately an item might sell for in the auction. But as we can see with Marie Antoinette's pieces, it can go far beyond that. So.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Sophie. Okay, then one more from Aisha. She's asking how to differentiate between natural and cultural pearl. And let me add one more question always from her. Which color is most favorable for pearls?
So as you saw in the
Eva,
presentation, yes, there are methods that we use to differentiate natural from cultured pearls. The most, the most common way that we use is the extradiography that shows us the internal growth pattern of each pearl. So they have completely different internal growth patterns, and with this imaging we can actually have a lot of information. Considering the color of pearls, well, it's mostly depending on the market. There are some traditional colors that are preferred in different locations in the world. Let's say in the Gulf region, people prefer the creamy colors, so the slightly yellowish tones on the white pearls, while in Europe we prefer the white pearls with the rosé overtone. So it really depends on the locations where you are in the world. So there is not one standard overtone or additional color on a white pearl that would add value. It is mostly based, if you have more than one pearl on a piece of jewelry, the value is mostly based on the characteristics of the pearls themselves, so the quality of the pearls and how well they match to each other.
Also a fan, I'm just jumping a little with the question, so we talk about pearls. A fan is asking, is treatment affect the price of pearls, and are all pearls treated? Eva.
The treatments will affect the price of the pearls, of course, because they will interfere with their aspect. So, well, keep in mind that the reason why we will treat any type of gem is to enhance or change its appearance. Enhance means make it prettier or more marketable than what it is when we mine it. So by changing this aspect, by adding, let's say, a little bit more attractiveness to the object, of course, we will change its marketability. But at the same time, if we certify that it has been treated, so what you see is the result of a treatment, and it's not truly how the material came out from the earth or from the oyster, if we're talking about the biogenic gems, then of course you will also have a difference in the price. How much the treatment will affect the price of the gem depends a lot on the type of treatment. There are some treatments that are considered to be more acceptable in the trade. There are others that are a bit too invasive, so those will dramatically influence the price.
Okay. Let me see if there are more questions about pearls, so we move toward other topics. From Giuseppe, there is a comment. Giuseppe is saying that the microtomography, micro-CT, is very good for pearls analysis in order to determine natural or cultivated. Yes, it is, Giuseppe. Thank you very much. I'm sorry, I'm answering for you, but it's okay. Yes,
it's okay.
Yeah, microtomography is a 3D imaging technique. So we can see basically inside the pearl, and it goes slice by slice. So we can have it's like we can have an image of slice by slice inside the pearl. Okay.
Keep in mind though that this requires, well, this and the DNA fingerprinting require a little bit of drilling on the pearl. So we will always start with the non-destructive techniques, and if the customer then allows us to interfere with the gems a little bit more, we can use other methods as well. So yeah.
Okay, now let's go let's enter in the sapphires topic. We have many, by the way. Many of them are concerning about the mines. So when the production in Kashmir stopped, and if there is a production today, and if there are mines open, and what is the difference with the old mines, etc. Okay, and basically, okay, that's all. Then I will mention the other one.
Okay, so the glory days, as both me and Sophie said before, were between 1881 and 1887. The glory days meaning that these were the years on which we had the during which, excuse me, we had the major production of the high quality Kashmir sapphires as we know them today and as we have seen in the jewelry in today's presentation. So after 1908, 1907 approximately, due to the difficult location, the harsh climate, and the fact that we didn't have enough production anymore, so that basically the sapphires were exhausted from that location, the mining in the old mines was officially abandoned. We have located the new mines that we mentioned in 1907, but as we said before, they didn't have the same quality of products or the same quantity of products like the old mines. In the 1950s, so many years after, there has been an attempt to develop a new mine, but the sapphires looked different. The color was mostly concentrated on the surface of the crystal. A lot of crystals were corroded, so the superficial layer of color was actually removed by nature. So the value of these sapphires was not even close to the value, to the quality, if you wish, of the sapphires we found originally in the old mines. So throughout these years until the 50s that I just mentioned, there have been attempts of the local ruler to lease the mines to some miners, or there have been smugglers and
Evan, Afan and Ahmed are asking more or less the same question. I will just change it a little. Talking about Kashmir and Kashmir, let's say, old mine, what is the finest color for a Kashmir?
Well, Sophia, I guess you will agree with me if I say that it is the one we saw in those two pieces of the Cartier bridge before. Yeah, so it is, if you want to put it in a gemological term, it is a blue to slightly violetish blue. And the important thing to add to that color is the velvety appearance. So this sleepiness, this smoothness that only these sapphires contain.
And Sophie, this is for you, again from Afan. It's a combination of questions, so I will try to again to summarize in one. So, are sapphires from other places with the same weight and color will cost the same like Kashmir? And if Kashmir has not the fine color, the price will be the same of fine color just because it's Kashmir?
So what I always like to say is that every single stone is different. And you've got an awful lot of characteristics coming into play with any stone. So no, it doesn't mean that Kashmir is automatically the most expensive. You can have paler Kashmirs, you can have smaller Kashmirs. I mean, consider the factors that influence the price and the value of stones is the carat weight, it's the color, it's the clarity, it's the cut. So all of these factors come into play. So no, you can have a very beautiful Burmese sapphire with an amazing color, which will be priced more expensively than a Kashmir if it's a weaker color. So it's just that traditionally Kashmir, when they have the best sapphires from Kashmir, these are the ones that are superlative to other sapphires from around the world. But every stone needs to be looked at very much on an individual basis.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Sophie. And one more question. I don't know if you, Sophie or Eva, you want to answer. How much will cost 1 carat Kashmir sapphire? I know you are in difficulties now.
It depends. We have to. If you have a 1 carat Kashmir, send me the details and I'll tell you. No, but it's just very difficult. We cannot say just based on a carat weight. We need to look at the color. We need to look at the cut. We need to look at the clarity. So
yeah, there is not a price list or correspondence so immediately. So
I wish it was that simple. Sadly, it's not.
Then Dan is asking why Kashmir sapphire have this soft velvet look. So Eva, for you, it's impurities or chemical composition? Are the treatments to make a classic sapphire look like a Kashmir? I mean, there exists an treatment.
It is not the chemical composition itself, because all sapphires, to be called sapphires, they do have the same chemical composition, no matter where they come from. What gives the Kashmiri stones this velvety appearance, as we said before, is the very, very tiny submicroscopic inclusions that they contain. that tend to diffuse the light that strikes the stones and intensify the blue color of the stones. So it is a particular type of inclusion, not the chemistry of the gem.
Okay. Now Monir is asking in okay, she saw that you mentioned Eva in some slides, so also you, Sophie, no heat. So I think she is looking for an explanation about what the meaning of no heat.
Yeah. So this is what we put into the auction. So into the auction cataloguing. So the vast majority, and Eva, jump in at any point here if you have some additional information, but the vast majority of coloured gemstones on the market today, some estimates say as much as 95%, if not more, are heated in some way to improve their colour and their clarity. So no heat means that it's been sent to a laboratory, it's been thoroughly examined, it's concluded that the coloured gemstone has not been treated in any way to improve its appearance. And this directly impacts its value by making it more valuable, because if you like, the stone has been cut by man, but everything else is completely natural. So that colour, that clarity is just made by nature, and that makes it very rare and therefore much more valuable.
Okay, thank you very much. No, Eva, if you want to add something about the treatments, etc., but it's fine. Yeah. Okay, this is a fun. Do we need a report for every stone? I mean, if a shop is sure of the type and origin of the stone, do I have to issue the report? So if I will reply. Fun? Yes. Yes, with a big character, big capital letters. Yes, absolutely yes. Because you cannot be never sure.
When you say the shop is sure, there must be a reason why the shop is so sure. So the shop can only be so sure about the nature of an important gemstone only if that gemstone has been analyzed by an expert, right? So, of course, if you're talking about all types of gemstones, let's say the most commercial quality rock crystal quartz that would cost you like 50 cents to buy, well, in that case, it might not be, required for you to sell it with a certificate. But if you're talking about important gemstones that need some extra information and backup for the nature and the presence or absence of treatments and everything, so then yes, absolutely yes.
Okay, now let me put together a couple of questions for you, Sophie. Different topics, but for you. Will Sotheby's auction be aired online, and where can we get the link? This is technical, I think.
Yes, of course. So the link to the auction itself,
Yeah.
I don't know if there's a way that I can send it on here, but otherwise, if you just message me on any of the details on the slide on the bottom left, I can send you the link, and we stream it. So the auction is split into two parts. So part one is the live auction, which is tomorrow, starting, as Fabio said, at 6 o'clock Oman time, tomorrow evening. And that can be watched online because it has a physical auctioneer in the auction room. So we stream that online. And then part two is the online part of the sale, and that runs online until this Thursday, the 13th. So that is a separate link as well. So I can send you both of those links. If you just message me, then I can send you that. But definitely, if you can tune in and watch part one, the physical auction tomorrow, because it's very fun and very exciting. It'll be very interesting to see what these pieces that we discussed today sell for.
Then Safa is asking to you, Sophie, she's very happy for the webinar, so thank you, Safa.
Right.
The noble jewels will be auctioned for the first time. Have they been ever auctioned before? So I think if there is an echo, no?
Yeah, so with these particular items that we discussed today, the tiara and the sapphire brooch, no, they haven't been auctioned before. This is what is very exciting. They've stayed with their respective families for hundreds of years. So this is why it's so exciting tomorrow to see what they sell for. Typically, the pieces, other pieces, a noble jewel sale, the majority of the time, it's the first time that they've come to market. And if they have been sold by Sotheby's before, so occasionally, you know, in the past, we've offered them for auction. We will always say in the auction cataloguing in the provenance section, you know, sold at Sotheby's in X year for X amount. Yeah.
Yeah, there is the history. Okay.
Exactly.
And
yeah.
Saud is asking to you. Okay, the same. How can I join tomorrow's action? But you already answered to it. Okay.
Yeah.
And I will be happy to see it. Okay. Questions for you. How can people make an action with Sotheby's? So I think to start with pieces with Sotheby's.
Yeah, of course. So if you have any items that you would like an auction estimate or an auction valuation for, again, my details are in the bottom left of this slide. You can message me on any of those. Hopefully I will be coming to Oman as soon as travel restrictions are lifted, so I can always see any items in person. But until then, I can look at images and give as much feedback as I can over those.
Okay. Okay, one more about pearls. So this is Suha is asking, what is your view of Melo pearls? Does it fall in different category of pearls of other pearls because it's formed by another organism? So I think you can, both of you can answer. Eva, Sophie.
We start with the technical part, and then you can follow with the opinion. So yes, of course, they are treated differently because they form inside the bodies of different marine animals, and therefore they do not have the same structure like the nacreous pearls that we discussed today. They do have calcium carbonate in their structure, but it is in a different form, so they will not show you this nacre that we saw in those pearls today. So they are basically, they are judged for their value on the basis of their color, the intensity of their color, their shape and their size, because the size too there is actually a very, very important factor. Most of them are very small, so when we get really large ones and very intensely colored ones, then their value very, very much rises.
Yeah, it's for Sotheby's and for auction when we value them, it's a very different way of valuing Melo pearls compared to natural pearls. So as Ava was saying, they're non-nacreous, and what their value is determined on is their color and also this very distinctive flame pattern that they have on the outside, and that's so it's a completely different characteristic of how they're valued to natural.
Okay, I'm seeing the end of the questions, so don't be worried. Yeah, just resist. Few more and we have done. So will we have more? This is another comment. We will have more Sotheby's and GLG webinars together in the coming time. Yes, why not? Yeah. Just follow us. Why not? It's funny to have a contact with all of you. So yes. Sorry, Sophie. Sorry, I'm answering this case. What is the meaning of eating the gemstones? So more or less, Eva, you answered before. So it's a treatment.
It's exposure of gemstones to raise temperature. Depending on the type of gemstone, we use different temperatures. And the purpose is to usually to change their color. In some occasions, we use it to change the clarity, to enhance the clarity. But in most cases, we use it to try to intensify or change completely the color of a gemstone.
Okay. Then Monir is thanking you both. And for your kindness. Same Fan is thanking you. Then we have 3 questions. Oh, no, sorry. One is again is a big thank from Muna and fantastic webinar. Last 2 questions. I want a little bit to add something when talking about first the question from Suga Ahmed, because the question is, what about star sapphires? Do they compete in value? And so this is for you, Eva. And then for you, Sophie, in your experience, there are many star sapphires, or let's say corundum, star corundum in, so including ruby too, or including also fancy sapphires in an action history. So Eva.
If they can compete in price, in value, that's the question. Well, we shouldn't compare the two because we're talking about two different types of gemstones. Although they're both corundums, the two different types of these corundums have different characteristics. So we base their evaluation on different factors. So my answer should stop here. We add some more information about the nature of the star sapphires. Keep in mind that for the non-phenomenal sapphires, like the Kashmiri stones we mentioned before, we value the color, we value the clarity, the cut, and the size, as Sophie also mentioned. The star sapphires have different characteristics that also cause this star effect, this star phenomenon. In most cases, the presence of the many inclusions they contain and due to which we have the formation, the presence of the star, also make the sapphires a little bit more opaque. So there are some different, let's say, considerations to think about when we grade and when we judge the quality of the star stones versus the non-phenomenal ones. So it would be better if you don't compare the two, because it is not really a correct thing to do. It's like you're comparing, although they're both sapphires, you're comparing two different types of things.
Okay, Sophie.
Yeah. Yep, agree exactly with what Ava says. And just the thing to be aware of about star sapphires is what impacts value as well is the obviousness of the star. So whether you can see it in daylight or whether you need to shine a torch over it. And as Ava was saying, that's just a completely different way of valuing them compared to other sapphires without that characteristic of the star.
Okay, then thank you from Malatis, who is sorry, Malatis, thanking you very much. Same from Safa. She said, very informative webinar and love the cornflower blue on you. This is really personal, okay. Really last one, it's from Dan again. Okay, Dan is asking, just to puntualize a little the reply to the question before. In this case, if the inclusions, the causing the velvet appearance in Kashmir sapphire can be induced by heat treatment or any kind of treatment.
Not really done. No, we can't. Usually with our heat treatment, we try to diminish the effect that the inclusions have in the clarity of the stones. We cannot really induce solid inclusions inside the gemstone with the treatment, so no. If we could, we would have done it. If we could imitate the Kashmir sapphires in a way, we would have done it, absolutely.
Okay, Sophia, I don't know if okay, Madam, she's saying thanks for amazing webinar. Aish is saying thank you, very, very informative. I loved attending. So I think now it's time for us to close the webinar. And personally, I want to thank, okay, Sophia and Eva, of course, but all of you viewers and attendees, because as always, you were so many and I'm very happy. I leave it to you, Sophie, if you would just for you the closing and Eva to after.
Oh, well, just to add to what you said, Fabio, thank you very much everyone for attending, for all the really interesting questions, and thank you as well, Fabio and Eva, for having me. It was a very interesting session.
Thank you, Sophie. Thank you, Fa. Thank you, everybody, for attending, and I hope to see you all in tomorrow's auction.
Right.
We'll see you all in your next webinar.
Just a geographical comment, but really we are moving between Europe, more or less Europe countries and GCC countries, and also Middle East countries, and India and Sri Lanka. I hope I mentioned all the countries, but it's very interesting. Thank you very much, everybody. So thank you again, Sophie. Thank you very much, Eva.
Thank you. See you.
And thanks all. I hope to see you soon next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.